Welcome love we once knew.
Ever wonder who else defined the 1960s beyond the Beatles and the Rolling Stones? Today, we will discuss forgotten stars and legends who lit up the decades with top hits or fresh styles, only to slip from memory. If you love exploring hidden sounds, stay with us. By the end, you may discover songs to add to your playlist or recall old favorites. Here we go. Crispian St. Peter's. Crispian St. Peter's stood out in the mid-1960s British pop scene. His best-known hit was The Pied Piper in 1966, which climbed to high positions in the US and UK. He had another chart success with You Were On My Mind. Despite these achievements, he was overshadowed by bigger British invasion bands. His gentle voice and melodic songs still hold charm today. The Amboy Dukes. The Amboy Dukes formed in Detroit. They gained attention with Journey to the Center of the Mind in 1968. Ted Nugent served as their lead guitarist, which gave the group a heavier rock edge than many peers. They saw some radio play, but their fame never matched major late 60s rock outfits. People often remember them now for Nugent's later solo career. Lorraine Ellison. Lorraine Ellison was an American soul singer with a voice that could captivate any audience. Her most famous recording was Stay With Me, 1966. Critics and fellow artists praised her powerful style. However, she didn't enjoy the same commercial success as major label acts like Aretha Franklin or Etta James. Her limited discography remains beloved by soul fans who appreciate heartfelt vocals. The Easy Beats. The Easy Beats were from Australia. They scored a global hit with Friday on My Mind in 1966, which was produced in London. This track blended catchy riffs and energetic vocals. Members Harry Vanda and George Young later became key producers in Australian rock. Despite that one big song, the Easy Beats weren't celebrated as widely as UK groups in the long run. Arthur Alexander. Arthur Alexander wrote songs that the Beatles and the Rolling Stones covered. His tune, You Better Move On, became a notable track for the Stones. Alexander's own releases had a smooth style that drew from country and soul. He never broke big in pop charts, but his songwriting influenced major 1960s rock. That legacy made him important in music history. The Marvelettes. The Marvelettes were Motown's first group to hit number one on the pop chart with Please Mr. Postman in 1961. They had more hits like Don't Mess with Bill. Over time, Motown spotlight shifted to the Supremes and Martha and the Vandellas. Still, the Marvelettes helped establish the label's early success and had a fresh, fun vocal blend. Shirley Ellis. Shirley Ellis became known for The Name Game, 1964, and The Nitty Gritty, 1963. She specialized in songs with playful wordplay and catchy rhythms. People often see her as a novelty legend, but her hits landed on both pop and R&B charts. She remains a figure of the early to mid-60s era, with her tunes often heard at parties or sing-along fun. The Shadows. The Shadows gained fame in the UK as Cliff Richard's backing group, and also as an instrumental band. Their big track was Apache, 1960. Their clean guitar sound influenced many future rock players. Though massive in Britain, they were less noticed in the US. By the time the British invasion became huge, vocal bands took the main spotlight. Mary Wells. Mary Wells, often called the First Lady of Motown, had a signature hit with My Guy in 1964. Before that, she had chart success with songs written by Smokey Robinson. After leaving Motown, her visibility faded, and she struggled to match the label's promotional might. Yet, her sweet and soulful style set the stage for later Motown stars. The Foundations. The Foundations were a UK soul band that included diverse members. They had hit songs like Baby Now That I've Found You, 1967, and Build Me Up Buttercup, 1968. Both songs became worldwide favorites, heard in films and commercials years later. However, the band name isn't as recognized as their tracks, which continue to bring joy to listeners. Bobby Vee. Bobby Vee emerged in the late 1950s after the tragic death of Buddy Holly. He filled in for Holly at a scheduled show and soon had hits like Take Good Care of My Baby, 1961. This tune went to #1 in the US. Vee was popular among teen fans, but when the British invasion arrived, many American teen idols lost momentum. The Surfaris. The Surfaris became famous for Wipeout, 1963. That drum intro is still one of the most recognized in rock. They also recorded Surfer Joe. Though Wipeout remains iconic in surf music, the band's identity is less prominent than peers like the Beach Boys. Their story is a reminder of how one song can overshadow a group's full catalog. Lulu. Lulu is a Scottish singer who scored a major US #1 with To Sir With Love in 1967. She appeared on TV and in films, which boosted her profile in the UK. Outside Britain, folks recall that one track more than her broader career. She continued performing, but Dusty Springfield and others often received more global recognition. The Zombies. The Zombies formed in St. Albans, England. Their hits included She's Not There, 1964, and Time of the Season, 1968. They also released the album Odyssey and Oracle, which critics later praised as a great 1960s record. Despite that acclaim, they didn't achieve the same commercial success as the Beatles or the Rolling Stones. Their melodic style still charms new fans. Little Eva. Little Eva made waves with The Locomotion in 1962, produced by Carole King and Jared Goffin. It reached #1 in the US. She recorded more singles, but none reached the same level. Her name is strongly linked to this dance hit. Other 1960s novelty songs often overshadowed her later work. Still, she holds a key place in the early 60s pop. Keep watching, there's a lot more to be discussed. The Walker Brothers. The Walker Brothers were Scott, John, and Gary Walker. They were actually Americans who found major success in Britain. The Sun Ain't Gonna Shine Anymore, 1966, was a chart smash. Their lush style and Scott Walker's baritone stood out. They lost steam by the end of the decade, and Scott pursued a solo path. Today, they're mostly remembered by UK music fans. Brian Hyland. Brian Hyland is known for the 1960s novelty smash Itsy Bitsy Teeny Weensy Yellow Polka Dot Bikini. He later had a hit with Sealed with a Kiss. He moved towards a more mature sound, but the British invasion shifted tastes. Though he kept recording, the early teen idol image stayed strong in public memory. That overshadowed his growth as a singer. The Grassroots. The Grassroots formed in Los Angeles. They charted with Let's Live for Today, 1967, and Midnight Confessions, 1968. Their sound blended pop hooks and a light rock feel. They were fixtures on AM radio through the late 60s. As music moved towards heavier rock and more experimental sounds, the Grassroots got less attention. Their catchy tunes remain fun to hear. Del Shannon. Del Shannon found fame in 1961 with Runaway, which topped charts in the US and reached high spots globally. His distinctive falsetto and energetic style made him stand out. He continued charting, but the explosion of Beatlemania overshadowed many American bands. Shannon remained active, and his early records influenced other rockers. Runaway still appears on oldie stations around the world. Herman's Hermits. Herman's Hermits formed in Manchester. They rose to fame with I'm Into Something Good, 1964. Other hits include Mrs. Brown, You've Got a Lovely Daughter. They were chart regulars in both the UK and the US. Despite huge sales, the group didn't sustain the same cultural impact as the Beatles or the Rolling Stones. Their cheerful pop style remains a hallmark of the era. Jackie DeShannon. Jackie DeShannon wrote songs and sang in a bright folk pop style. She is known for What the World Needs Now Is Love, 1965, and Put a Little Love in Your Heart, 1969. She also opened for the Beatles on tour in 1964. Despite her songwriting gifts, she didn't reach the same level as Carole King or Joni Mitchell in public memory. The Seeds. The Seeds were a California garage rock group. Their big track, Pushin' Too Hard, 1966, embodied raw energy and a rebellious feel. They represented a proto-punk style before the term existed. They never achieved mass popularity, but later musicians cited their influence. These days, many people discover them through 60s compilation albums or playlists that feature early garage rock. Chuck Jackson. Chuck Jackson sang soul and R&B with class. He recorded Any Day Now in 1962, written by Butch Bacharach and Bob Hillard. It charted well on pop and R&B rankings. He worked with labels like Wand and Motown, but he didn't gain the iconic status of Marvin Gaye or Stevie Wonder. Soul fans respect his smooth style and heartfelt vocal approach. The Honeycombs. The Honeycombs scored a UK #1 with Have I the Right in 1964. They were produced by Joe Meek, known for an innovative recording style. Honey Lantry was their drummer, and a rare female drummer in a hit group at the time. They had a fresh look, but they didn't repeat that early success and soon faded from the charts. Betty Everett. Betty Everett is best remembered for the Shoop Shoop song, It's in His Kiss, 1964. She also teamed with Jerry Butler for the duet Let It Be Me. Though she had a strong voice and some chart success, bigger labels like Motown took much of the spotlight. The track, the Shoop Shoop song, lives on in covers by Cher and others. The McCoys. The McCoys were behind the #1 smash, Hang On Sloopy, in 1965. The song remains a favorite in sports arenas, especially in Ohio. The group included Rick Derringer, who later had a solo career. Despite that huge single, the McCoys didn't reach the same level with other releases. They still deserve credit for one of the catchiest riffs of the mid-60s. Skeeter Davis. Skeeter Davis was a country pop singer. Her best crossover hit was The End of the World, 1963. The song rose high on multiple charts, including pop and country. Davis faced competition from stars like Patsy Cline. Still, she made her mark on country music with a gentle style that crossed genres. Her recordings paved the way for more pop-friendly country singers. The Cowsills. The Cowsills were a family band that scored with The Rain, The Park, and Other Things, 1967. Their bright harmonies and wholesome image later inspired the TV show The Partridge Family. They had more hits like Indian Lake. As the late 60s moved towards rock experimentation, their bubblegum pop appeal waned. Yet, they remain a fun footnote in 60s pop culture. Lou Christie. Lou Christie reached #1 in the US with Lightning Strikes, 1966. His falsetto stood out, and he released other charting singles like Two Faces Have I. He wrote many of his own songs. As the decade ended, rock music shifted, and Christie's style became less popular. His success still reflects a phase when catchy pop ballads ruled the airwaves. The Association. The Association specialized in harmony-rich pop. They had major hits like Cherish, 1966, and Windy, 1967. Both topped the Billboard Hot 100. Their layered vocal sound influenced sunshine pop. Yet, with psychedelic and heavier rock on the rise, the Association's soft pop band seemed old-fashioned. They still remain a showcase of polished harmonies and refined songcraft. Chris Montez. Chris Montez is known for Let's Dance, 1962. It was a hit in both the US and the UK. Montez later moved to a softer pop jazz approach, influenced by Herb Alpert's A&M label. However, the British invasion interrupted many American pop careers. Montez's early rock single, remains a go-to track for fans of pre-Beatles pop sounds. Love. Love was an LA band led by Arthur Lee. They released Forever Changes in 1967, which critics later ranked among the great rock albums. They mixed folk, rock, and orchestral elements. They didn't achieve huge commercial gains like the Doors, who were also from Los Angeles. Love's cult following grew in later decades, with many praising their creative approach. Brenda Lee. Brenda Lee had hits like I'm Sorry, 1960. She was also known for Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree, released in 1958, but popular during the 60s. She was very young when she started, which was notable at the time. As British bands rose, her rockabilly pop style became less prominent in pop charts. Still, she had over 40 US top 40 hits. The Shangri-Las. The Shangri-Las stood out with dramatic teen stories. Their best-known hit was Leader of the Pack, 1964. They also had Remember, Walking in the Sand. Their edgy look and spoken word segments influenced later girl groups. They had success, but after a few years, the group split. People often recall their dramatic approach and tough image among 1960s girl groups. P.P. Arnold. P.P. Arnold began as a member of the Ike and Tina Turner Revue. She moved to the UK and recorded The First Cut is the Deepest in 1967. She worked with Steve Marriott of Small Faces and other British musicians. Her singles charted in the UK, but she wasn't as big as Motown's global stars. She remains a key American soul voice abroad. Question Mark and the Mysterians. This Michigan garage band scored a #1 with 96 Tears in 1966. They had a mysterious image, led by a singer known as Question Mark. Some say it was an early form of proto-punk. Their success was short, and the band mostly faded by the late 60s. They remained influential in garage rock circles, and are sometimes credited with helping shape early punk attitudes. Chris Farlowe. Chris Farlowe is best remembered for Out of Time, a Rolling Stones written track that became a UK #1 in 1966. He had a gritty, soulful style. Though he worked with top names like Andrew Loog Oldham, he didn't enjoy massive status of other British R&B singers. He continued performing in various rock and blues groups later on. The Dave Clark Five. The Dave Clark Five rivaled the Beatles for a while in Britain. Glad All Over, 1963, knocked the Beatles off the #1 spot in the UK. They also had a strong presence in the US. Yet, their legacy didn't endure at the same level. Some chalk it up to fewer reissues or less media coverage in later years. Bobby Rydell. Bobby Rydell was among the early 60s teen idols. He had hits like Wild One, 1960, and regularly appeared on shows like American Bandstand. When Beatlemania swept the US, the style of teen idol pop slipped off the charts. Rydell still had a following, but his peak came before 1964. He is often mentioned alongside Frankie Avalon and Fabian. The Left Bank. The Left Bank introduced a Baroque pop style in the mid-60s. Walk Away Renee, 1966, was a big hit. It combined classical elements with rock, creating a delicate sound. They had another moderate hit, Pretty Ballerina. Internal issues hampered their progress, as the public gravitated towards the psychedelic wave. Their small but important discography still inspires fans of orchestral pop. We've covered 40 musicians so far. Each had a role in shaping the decade. Let's wrap this up with some of the final entries on our list. Be sure to share any favorites in the comments later. Major Lance. Major Lance was a Chicago soul singer famous for 1963. The song was later written by Curtis Mayfield. Lance had more top R&B hits, but later label moves and changes in style reduced his visibility. He stayed active in the soul circuit, yet he didn't reach the same level as other Chicago musicians, like the Impressions. The Standells. The Standells were from Los Angeles and had a notable hit, Dirty Water, 1966, which referenced Boston. Even though they're tied to that city's sports event, they were actually an LA band. They were part of the garage rock movement that influenced future punk. Once the psychedelic era began, they lost chart traction, but Dirty Water remains a sports anthem in Boston. Gene Pitney. Gene Pitney had a distinctive voice and wrote songs like Hello Mary Lou for Ricky Nelson. As a performer, he scored hits with Town Without Pity, 1961, and Only Love Can Break a Heart, 1962. He was successful in the UK too. Though he had many charting singles, his name doesn't always appear in the top 1960s lists. His range in songwriting still amazes fans. The Tornadoes. The Tornadoes were a British instrumental group produced by Joe Meek. They made history with Telstar, 1962, the first song by a UK band to reach #1 in the US. That track was spacey and futuristic for its time. Although it sold millions, the Tornadoes struggled to repeat that feat. The British invasion wave soon arrived with vocal rock bands, pushing many instrumental bands aside. The Rascals. The Rascals, formerly known as the Young Rascals, topped US charts with Good Lovin', 1966, and had other hits like Groovin', 1967, and People Got to Be Free, 1968. They blended pop, rock, and blue-eyed soul. They were big in the late 60s, but changes in the music scene in the early 70s led to a drop in mainstream presence. Their singles still pop up in oldies stations. Garnet Mimms. Garnet Mimms is most often associated with Crybaby, 1963. His gospel-influenced soul singing influenced later artists like Janis Joplin, who covered that track. Though he had a few other chart songs, his name isn't as celebrated as Wilson Pickett or Sam Cooke. Yet, soul fans hold him in high regard for his powerful and emotional performance style. The Ventures. The Ventures are an instrumental rock band who sold over 100 million records worldwide. Walk Don't Run, 1960, and the Hawaii Five-0 theme, 1969, remained their signature tunes. They influenced many guitarists thanks to their crisp sound and creativity. Despite huge sales, instrumental groups rarely get the same coverage as vocal-based performers in rock history. They still tour with evolving lineups. The Searchers. The Searchers came from the same Liverpool scene as the Beatles. Their hits included Needles and Pins, 1964, and Love Potion No. 9. They had a jangly guitar style that influenced folk rock, but they didn't sustain the same giant presence as the Beatles or the Hollies. They stayed active for decades, mostly appealing to fans of the Merseybeat sound. Tommy Roe. Tommy Roe had chart toppers like Sheila, 1962, and Dizzy, 1969. He bridged early 60s bubblegum pop and late 60s pop rock. His friendly voice and upbeat songs found favor on radio. As tastes shifted towards album-oriented rock, Roe's brand of light pop became less trendy. Still, Dizzy and Sheila often show up in oldies playlists and remind listeners of simpler pop hooks. Barbara Lewis. Barbara Lewis was an R&B singer who had a smash hit with Hello Stranger, 1963. That soft, dreamy single reached #3 on the pop chart. She recorded for Atlantic and worked with producer Ollie McLaughlin. Though admired in R&B circles, she didn't become a top Motown-like figure. Her music continues to resonate with fans who like smooth, romantic 1960s soul. Thanks for staying with us through these 50 names from the 1960s. They each found a unique sound, whether in soulful ballads, surf tunes, or British pop hits. If you remember any of them, leave a comment and share your favorite track or memory. If this list is all new to you, explore a few songs and see what you enjoy. Feel free to like and subscribe if you want more videos like this. See you next time!